Like Lisa, like Lisa said, my name is Gina Fatzinger, and I've been going to New Life Fellowship for about a year and a half. It's so nice to see everybody here and to see all the fruits of Lisa's labor come to fruition and everyone who pitched in. Over the past couple weeks, I've been thinking about what I wanted to share with you, and I've been thinking about the theme of our event, Psalm 23, My Cup Overflows. And if I'm really honest with myself, there are moments over the past year where my cup hasn't always felt very full. And I know that I'm not alone in that today. I know that we all probably came in the door feeling different levels of fullness. Some of us probably do feel like we're overflowing with joy and abounding. And some of us probably feel kind of tapped out. And some of us might feel both of those things at the same time. For me personally, excuse me, just to share a little backstory, my husband and I got married a little over 2 years ago, right before COVID started, and we pretty immediately moved across the country from Georgia to Utah. He is a student at USU. And at first that felt really exciting. I like change sometimes. Change in moderation can be a good thing. We get to live in this beautiful valley surrounded by mountains, and I had never been any farther west than Kansas City in the United States before, so it was a whole new part of the country for me. And it felt like a really big adventure, starting our new life together that way. But then, of course, we kind of settled into normal, everyday life, and the newness wore off, and we looked around and realized, wow, all of our family members and our close friends and every relationship and familiar place that we've leaned on for so long isn't right here for us to lean on anymore. And it was a lot of change all at the same time, especially with COVID. I work from home. I'm a full-time copywriter, and my husband is my friend, of course, but he's a busy PhD student. So if I sum up the past year in one word, I would say that at times it has felt pretty lonely or isolated, even as I would start to get out and maybe get involved in more things, or having a church family has definitely helped, but still is kind of a shy person and just a very new place. Forming those deeper relationships and friendships has been a slow process for me. I'm honestly a little embarrassed to be sharing about this today because I know it's a relatively small problem in light of what some other people are probably going through, but I think we all know, especially after the past 2 years, that human connection is so important. And having those really deep, nourishing friendships is so important. But I've also been reminded in this season that when the crutches are kind of kicked out from under us and those things that we are used to leaning on, those people we're used to leaning on aren't right there anymore, we discover how much we're really leaning on God. And when those sources that maybe have made me feel full in the past run dry, is God really the one who fills my cup? And in the moments where I've been kind of wrestling through that, one of the things that has really helped me and really kept me going and really just helped me to fill up my cup a little bit when I do feel empty is the practice of remembrance. Remembering what God has done and how he's been faithful in the past helps me to remember that he will be faithful again. And remembering that he's always had a purpose and a plan and that he's been intentional with ordering the steps of my life helps me to remember that he can be trusted to do that again. The Bible talks so much about remembrance. In Deuteronomy 6, God calls the Israelites to remember his words. And he says this, "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates." And I think he says all that because he knows how easy it is for us to forget. Put them in front of your eyes, put it top of your mind, put it on your door frame, stick it on your mirror if you need to, whatever you have to do, because otherwise you're going to forget. And then in the same chapter, he reminds them that once they enter the promised land, once they receive the promises, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. Because then in those times when we receive the promises and we feel comfortable and we don't need him to part the Red Sea anymore and we don't have to cling to him to make it through the day, that's when it becomes easiest to forget. We see remembrance so much throughout the Psalms where David or whomever wrote that particular psalm will be expressing so much woe and anguish and just be so deep in their feelings and then turn it around to remember what God has done. Just one example of that is in Psalm 77, where the psalmist spends lines and lines talking about how he cried to God for help. He cried out for God to hear him, communicating his distress and trouble. But then in verse 10, he turns it around and he says, "Then I thought, to this I will appeal, the years when the Most High stretched out his right hand. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all your works and meditate on all your mighty deeds." I could list a lot of other examples that I won't now for time's sake, but according to Google, the word remember is in the Bible about 240 times. And so it seems like remembering God's works and his words and his promises is pretty important to him. And so lately, this is what I'm about to share with you is going to sound like just a random string of stories that don't really go together, but this is what's been helpful to me lately. I've just had to start at the beginning and try to recall every time that I feel like I can clearly see God's hand working in my life. I remember always first how he radically saved my sister when I was 6 years old. We're pretty spaced out in age. She's 14 years older than me. And she was kind of a wild child. I always thought she was the absolute coolest, and I still do. But she was the self-described black sheep of the family. We don't call her that. She called herself that. But she got saved in college. She accepted the Lord, and that was such a big deal. And just seeing that huge shift in her, the change in her, it wasn't that she became perfect overnight or anything, but she was just a different kind of sister after that. She was a different kind of daughter to my parents. And that was really such a testimony to our family and the thing that caused our parents to start taking us regularly to church and ultimately brought our whole family into personal relationship with Christ. I remember after that, the first time she prayed with me and talked to me directly about God. She told me that God is listening to me and that he loves to hear my voice. And to demonstrate that, she had us pray for a rainbow. And so we prayed to see this rainbow, and we got all pumped and excited, and we ran outside, and there was no rainbow. But just a few weeks later, it was on my very first plane ride, and she was already away at college at the time, so we weren't always in the same place at the same time. But we were together, we were sitting next to each other on the plane, and as soon as we got up into the sky, we looked out the window, and we saw a rainbow right in front of our faces. And she made sure to remind me that God might not answer right away, but he does respond, and his timing is perfect, and he does more than we can ask or imagine. And then thinking of that moment, it's like a domino effect. It starts to bring up other moments. I remember the first time I prayed by myself shortly after that. I was like, well, God's listening apparently, so and I can talk to him about other things. And I was a little kid at the time, so I was mostly, of course, just kind of asking for things. But I asked God on this particular day for my favorite episode of Happy Days to come on. I was really into Happy Days. And I will never forget that my favorite episode was where Joni has a crush on Potsy. And I prayed for this episode to come on, and it had just come on the day before, so there was really no reason that it should be coming on again unless it was like a mistake by the network or something. But I got down on my little knees, and I prayed for this episode to come on, and I remember even then as a child trying to, prepare my heart for disappointment. It's okay if it doesn't come on, God's still real, and it's all right. But it did come on. I don't know how to say that other than that episode did come on that day. And I was like, Lord, I will believe in you forever. And I know that sounds weird and silly, and I don't even 100% understand why that happened, why that one and not some other prayers, but I just think that was our sweet Father at the time when I was just learning about him, showing a little girl that he was listening in the way that I would understand it best at the time. This next story I've been thinking of goes back to the rainbow incident. Since the rainbow happened, rainbows have just been kind of special to me. I feel like I'll see one on a significant day, or I'll ask God for one, and then I'll see one shortly afterward. But up until this time, I've been living in Georgia and Florida, where it rains a lot. And so if I ask for a rainbow, I have a 65% chance of driving down the road and seeing a rainbow. Since I've been here in dry Utah, I haven't really bothered. I just haven't really asked for one. But I was about a year ago, last summer, going home to Georgia for a trip. And I was like, well, it's been raining so much there, I'll pray for a rainbow. And so I asked God to see a rainbow while we were in Georgia, and I Got on the plane, we went through our whole week, and I didn't see one. And I honestly kind of forgot that I had even prayed this prayer. But we came back, our plane landed, and I turned my phone back on, and I had gotten a text message from a friend in Georgia with a picture of a rainbow that she had seen. And I was like, oh yeah, I had prayed that prayer, and I hadn't told her about it or anything. She just knows I like rainbows and wanted to share it with me, but I was like, I guess this kind of counts. Like, I saw a picture of a rainbow, and that's cool, I guess. But we got in the car, and we were almost back here. I live here in this apartment complex. Welcome to my home. Don't stalk me, but I also need friends, so you can if you want to, I guess. But we were almost back here, and I looked up into the dry Utah sky, and I saw a rainbow. It wasn't a big one, but it was a significant rainbow. And I was just so awed by that, so dumbfounded, because it was like I had prayed for this rainbow at a time when I thought it was more likely to happen, and when I thought that maybe it would be easier for God to do. And he just reminded me again that even the things I think are impossible and unlikely are easy for him too. Then I was kind of trying to think through some of the other times when I was experiencing maybe a challenge or going through a more difficult season, and I remembered this dream I had a few years ago. I warned you that this was going to be a random string of stories. So just go with me for a second. I'm not like a crazy dream person. I don't dream all the time, and a lot of the time when I do dream, it's like a weird spicy pickles before bed dream. But I went to sleep, and I had this dream that I was in class with Jesus. And he wasn't the teacher, he was a student in the classroom, and he was kind of sitting in the middle of the room, and I was off to the side. And I just could not stop staring at him and smiling this big, goofy smile, and I was kind of embarrassing myself because other kids in the class were starting to look and snicker because I was just being so obvious. But I was like, that is him, that's Jesus, that's the guy. Do they not know? Like, how am I even supposed to pay attention to what this teacher is saying right now? But the teacher had one of those old school projectors where they give you the laminate sheet to write on, and then they reflect your work on the board. You know what I'm talking about. And so she gave us all one of these laminated sheets, and she gave us an assignment to write our greatest weakness. And everybody instantly started whispering about Jesus. What is he possibly going to say? His greatest weakness? He doesn't have one. A little side note, my name is Gina Josephine Fatzinger, but at the time my maiden name was Gina Josephine Borg. And she projected our answers up on the board, and he gave his to her, and she put his up there, and it said my name in big letters, and Jesus said it out loud from his seat, my weakness is Gina J. Borg. And I started blushing, and all the class was like, ooh. And then I woke up. And I felt so happy after that dream. And honestly, when I had it, I wasn't in the best place in life. I was trying to be faithful. I was trying to follow God as best I knew how. But I was also in a pretty unhealthy relationship at the time. And I was just struggling to feel like God was pleased with me. I felt like I had to do so many things and run around and just was dealing with a lot of striving. Trying to just make him not upset with me, I guess. And then when I had what felt like this very loving dream, I kind of had to pray about it and ask God what it meant, if it meant anything, because I know that you don't have any weaknesses. But as I started to think about it, I realized that I am, you are his chosen weakness, because what else could cause God to leave his perfect home in heaven and take on vulnerable flesh and come suffer and be rejected and die, except his chosen love for us? Maybe a better way of saying that would be that he has a soft spot for us. So he has a weakness, he has a soft spot for you. And so I know, again, that all of that sounds like a random collection of stories, and when I was writing this down, that's how it felt. Like, I remember this one time and then this other time. But I think our random stories are so important because the word says that we overcome by what? By the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. And by loving our lives not unto death. Sometimes we leave that part out because it doesn't look good on a fridge magnet. But I think the word of our testimony part is really key to that when trials and hard times come and the prayers really feel unanswered and we can't see the fulfilled promises right in front of our faces anymore, our cups of faith and joy still stay full because we remember who God's been in the past, and it keeps us rooted and grounded in who he still is and who he will be forever. In this season of being in a different place, I've especially been remembering how I moved to Florida for a job. It's the same job I have now, but I moved to work in the office for the first couple years that I was there. But I moved not knowing anyone, and I had prayed for strong friendships, and though it took several months for me to adjust, and I was pretty unhappy for the first period, I ended up making some of the best, most important friendships that I've ever had. And so when I prayed for those same blessings and for a sense of home here, I think I expected God to do it the exact same way this time. I know I expected him to do it the same way. But the other day, God brought this line from Prince Caspian to mind, one of the books in the Chronicles of Narnia series, where Lucy is asking Aslan, "Why didn't you come to save us like last time?" And he says, "It's hard for you, little one, but things never happen the same way twice." And so even in practicing remembrance and remembering what he's done in the past, I know that God's character is steady and sure, but the way that he moves and answers might not always look the same way. Ultimately, when I intentionally take time to remember these things, though, I can remember all these different times that he has been faithful, and it keeps me going, it keeps me rooted and grounded in him, and I hope that's true for you too. Whether your cup feels full or empty today, whether you feel like you're in more of a mountaintop season or in a valley season, I pray that you can remember the marks of God's goodness on your life, whether they're small or big, moments where he led you through something that you felt like you couldn't get through, or where he spoke to your heart directly, or put someone in your life at just the right time that you needed them. And I believe strongly that if you ask him and you wait on the Lord with an open heart, he will reveal the evidence of his goodness in your history and bring these moments to mind. I know from living here that when you're in the valley, you can still see the mountains in the distance. You can see the peaks you've stood on in the past. You can maybe see places you'd like to climb in the future. You might have to do a lot of hard work to get there. It might not always feel good, and the path might not look the same way that it did the last time. But if we look back over the course of our lives, I think it's really safe to say that God is with us, and that he's for us, and that he loves us, and that he has a plan and a purpose for wherever you are in your life right now. And every prayer that he's answered, every time he's shown up, every single blessing that we have is a miracle from him and something to be really thankful for. You are his beloved one, and I think he longs to romance your heart and make his goodness known to you. Thank you.